Thank you very much. Okay, good morning again. So this morning I would like to share with you about the interconnection between biodiversity and climate change. I think every country and public society we know a lot about the climate change, but the biodiversity is quite lacking, particularly for the policy maker. I used to be I am a member of the National Committee on the Climate Change. When the Minister of Environment chaired the meeting, I think he lacked understanding about the biodiversity, but everybody know the climate change. So beside the principle of the IES, I also have the other hat as the bureau member of the IPES, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and also a co-chair of the Asia Pacific Biodiversity Observation Monitoring. So in mid-October, Thailand will host the next Asia Pacific Biodiversity Monitoring. So if anyone is interested, you are welcome. Take some time. Maybe you can help me. Okay, next. Okay. So this morning I would like to share with you about 4 topics. One is about the climate change impact on biodiversity. I think you already heard and highlighted by Dr. Kim Young-sik, the previous speaker. And the second one is the regional and global policy framework that are related to this interconnected issue. And the third one, some example of the land-based action to mitigate the climate change, and some example particularly from Thailand and the way forward. Next. So Asia Pacific. So Asia Pacific contribute about 22% of the global land. However, our regions have more than 60% of the population. And most importantly, the people living in Asia Pacific, they are highly dependent on the natural resources. As the previous speaker highlighted, in Mongolia, the nomadics living in the nomadic lifestyle, right? And in the other country as well. But however, Asia Pacific contributes and is recognized as the home of biodiversity. For example, 17 out of 36 global biodiversity hotspots are located in Asia Pacific, and 7 of 17 mega diverse fauna are located in here. India, China, Australia, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Malaysia, and Philippines. Thailand ranks at the 20. Next. Our biodiversity have been threatened and a lot lost, mainly come by the 5 main drivers at the global level: the land use change, climate change, overexploitation, pollution, and invasive species. And for the climate change, it contributes about 20%. These are the output from the previous global assessment. So even though in Asia Pacific we do not have the number, right, the global assessment, but it shows the similar trend that the climate change and land use change are the main threat to biodiversity. And if we do nothing, we expect that a lot of biodiversity will be extinct in the near future. Next please. So the chief of the UN already mentioned that the era of the global warming is already gone, right? Now we are in the era of the global warming. So in last month, I think a lot of countries in Asia Pacific we experience about the Wipa typhoon. For example, more than 400 millimeters of the rainfall within 24 hours and have a lot of impact to the eastern China and in the southern Korea. So 1 week after this typhoon hit China and Korea, it came to Thailand. So many provinces in northern Thailand are underwater right now because we have more than 300 millimeters of rainfall within 24 hours. And even though our drainage system is much better than Mongolia, but the capacity is not enough to flow the huge rainfall within 24 hours, and particularly the mountainous area have been converted to the what you call the upland plantation, particularly corn. Next. So if you see the previous assessment from the IPBES, so you see that the Asia Pacific, particularly Southeast Asia, will have a lot of great impact from the climate change, either 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. So if the temperature is rising to 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, so we expect, I think, more than 50% of biodiversity will go to extinction by the end of the 2100. Next. So this is the example of Thailand. I did it a few years ago. So this one example that the species that already exists in the certain area with the climatic envelope, it may be shipped to the other area. So if they cannot exist, they will be gone in the future, and the next species will replace. I think you will hear a lot of similar this presentation from many speakers or the presentation I checked from the program. Next. So the species loss or species shift, not only one species, but also many species will change their location from one area to the other area. So it has the consequence to the change of ecosystem, or other, maybe we can have the novels or the new ecosystem. For example, in Thailand, based on modeling of 200 tree species, so the output predict that we will lose a number of the huge area of the evergreen forest, particularly in the high area. But the deciduous forest will invade the evergreen forest, as it has the consequence on the other biodiversity, wildlife, and hydrological resources. And the other one for the mammal or the bird, I think there are a lot of examples from Australia and from Nepal or the high altitude mountain, that the bird or the wildlife species will move upward to the high altitude and also to the North Pole. So these are the examples of more than 50 species of the present species that it will shift from one area to the other, and this one we expect the loss of the suitability in the future. Next. So, however, the biodiversity and the climate change are interconnected, but unfortunately, in the previous decades, the implementation and the action of this issue are quite separate. For example, the IPCC that are dealing with the climate change have been established since 1992, and they have their own convention, they have their own assessment. For the biodiversity, in 2012, they also have the IPBES as the organization, and they have their own assessment and publish a lot of the thematic, global and regional assessment, but the connection between these two organizations are quite lacking. But Fortunately, a couple of years ago, so there was a joint workshop between these two forums, biodiversity and climate change, and published a workshop report. Is very interesting. But right now, this is the real assessment. So as the IES, if you remember, I mentioned earlier, so we have the concrete discussion that maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, so both IPCC and IES will do a new assessment on the connecting between biodiversity and climate change. Yeah. So these are the reasons, the publication that was launched last year in Namibia. One is the transformative change, and the other one is the nexus of biodiversity, water, climate, and other. So they propose that if we want to seriously deal with the climate change and biodiversity issue, as highlighted by the previous speaker, so the government, the perception and action must be changed rapidly or transformed from one other to the other, and think about the integrated approach rather than the silo approach one by one, but no connection or no synergy between these two issues. Next. So besides the IES and the IP-based, so recently there are a lot of the global and regional policy framework that want to promote and to solve this problem. Particularly the Kunming and Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that's supposed to be held in China, right? But because of the COVID-19, so there will no change to Canada. And the SDG and UN strategy on the climate change, global and destination and bond sharing, that they want to plant 30 million hectares to solve the destination and climate change. CITES, UN, even the ASEAN strategy for carbon neutrality system. Next. So I would like to show some example of the CBD Kunming and Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So there are 23 targets and 4 goals that they want to achieve the vision that nature in harmony into 2050. So regarding biodiversity, these are the 3 most important targets in the global biodiversity framework. The target 1 is all area are planned managed to bring the loss of the area of high biodiversity or close to zero. And the other one is member country should encouraged to expand a protected area or the similar conservation approach like the IES2025 to achieve 30% by 2030. I think Mongolia also have followed this target. And the last one is 30 by 30 of the conservation area, either by the traditional protected area or the other form like the IES2025 or the key biodiversity area. So if you look at the existing protected area in each country, this one I show only in some Asia Pacific. Okay, Brunei, rich country, they already have almost 40, Cambodia 41, but the question about the effectiveness, Laos 18, Thailand we have more than 23, but the other countries like the Myanmar, Philippines or the other, and Vietnam 8%, even though Vietnam has a lot of forest cover. But to expand to 30% is the question, is it achievable? And about the effectiveness, for example, in Cambodia, they have a lot of national park or wildlife sanctuary, but most of them are recognized as the paper park, no implementation on the ground. China, Japan, Korea, I think this one is very good because it's recognized as a developed country. Next. This is the example from Thailand. So Thailand, we employ the spatial planning of protected area. So right now we have 24%. So we want to expand, but only protected area, national park and wildlife sanctuary. That's one is impossible because the remaining forest area are fragmented, very small area and no high biodiversity. So the other kind, we want to use the OECM and key biodiversity and try to connect the fragmented protected area and forest cover. Next. So this one, okay, there are also some questions. If we have duplication, can we solve the problem of the climate change? So based on the analysis, so we show that we can solve some problem. We can conserve more ecosystem, birds, and some mammal. But for the some ecosystem like the mangrove forest, wetland, the mountainous area, or the endangered species, even though we have 30%, we cannot solve the problem perfectly. Next. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So beside that, we also propose the other kind of the conservation area, like we call the OECM, right? Outside the traditional protected area. So these are the example of the OECM, the community forest. So right now we have almost 20,000 of community forest, but not all community forests are suitable. And this one is the private conservation area, the land owned by the private NGO. This one is the urban park, and we want to connect the existing protected area with the remnant forest in the buffer zone. We want to facilitate the migration of wildlife species. The one that the transboundary biodiversity area from Thailand and Myanmar are also recommended to facilitate the migration of the large mammal like the tiger, elephant, and also hornbill. The other one for the degraded ecosystem. So nature-based resolution might be suitable approach because it is cheaper than the real restoration by the infrastructure. So this is the example from Indonesia. So the peat swamp have been degraded by the drainage of water and forest fire. So they use the nature-based resolution. They block the water preventing. So within less than 10 years, so the peatland regenerates very well. Next. So how about the financial support? So this is a recent report published by UNDP. So right now, I think all governments contribute about 1.7 trillion US dollar to mitigate the impact of environment, and 5 trillion from the private sector, but mainly to upgrade the machinery, the infrastructure, and so on, so forth. But however, there are still some gap in the investment. How about the nature-based resolution that we think that is very cheap and the most effective? This one contributes only 11% of the total investment, because most of the investment the government pays from the subsidy, right? And the to restore the national disaster like the drought and the flooding. So if you see this one, you see that, okay. Right now we have about 200 billion. So the government contribute about 82% and private sector 80%. So there are some gap. So there are some more opportunity and some improvement. And I am very pleased that the DB insurance company is the showcase that the private sector contribute, and first the nature based resolution. So how about in the future? So in the future, we cannot separate biodiversity and development, national park or non-national park, but it have to go in harmony and in the coexist. So this is the, I think, very popular paper that you see that is the trend of the current trend. So this one show the, okay, if we have the only protected area, so at the beginning, okay, we can have more protected area. But in the future, that is not the real solution because the people lack opportunity. They have to buy more expensive food and they cause their livelihood that they are depending on the natural resources. So biodiversity and development have to coexist. Yeah. So if you see this one, I already showed the figure of the protected area. But however, there are a number area or the large area which are located outside protected area. So in the future, I think the government not only pay attention to the protected area itself, but also the area outside national park, right? The national production forest. If we still have the logging concession or the planted area for the economic forest, and for the secondary and degraded forest, for the restoration, and also for the in the city, change the perception of the people. So if there are some guideline, if we want to manage the national forest, we still have the logging concession. So how should we do? One is to avoid the conflict between human and wildlife, and what's called maintain the important and keystone resources, particularly the micro habitat for some mammal and keystone resources like the soil and water resources. Next. And this is the example of the landscape restoration in Thailand. So this area in one of the area northeast of Thailand, it used to be like this in 1984, but with the restoration, so we have more forest cover and also facilitate the connection between two big national parks and a lot of wildlife. Use this corridor to migrate, and also it contribute to the carbon sequestration. Next. This is the other example that I did with my graduate student in northern Thailand. So we have three land use scenarios. One is the extreme conservation, and the other one with the trend scenario or the intensive agriculture, and the other one is the integrated approach, and we combine with the climate change. Next. So based on the analysis and using the simulation model to evaluate the effect of the integrated land use change to the water use and sedimentation. So the results clearly show that if we have integrated approach, more forest cover, but also recognize the livelihood of people, we can prolong the water flows in the stream 2 more months that substantially reduce the soil erosion. Next. So how about the economic plantation? So the government alone cannot do the plantation by itself, and also based on experience, is not successful. So right now in Thailand and many countries in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, we want to promote the smallholder plantation. But however, the smallholder, they lack of the financial support to prolong the rotation to 20 years or 30 years, right? Because if we can prolong the long rotation, this one also contribute to the nature, carbon sequestration and biodiversity. But how the government can provide the subsidy and support the local people? So there are a lot of the mechanisms, something like the T-bank, collateral, and the loan, soft loan from the government. Okay. Next. This one, if we can do this one successfully, So we can reduce a lot of the carbon emission. So right now the government of Thailand paid a lot of money for this one, okay, for the infrastructure and the climate change and so on and so forth. But they don't put very small money for the forestation, because only forest can solve the carbon emission, right, from the photosynthesis. So if you see that when we have the plan to achieve the forest plantation, so if the government invest this money, it's very small amount, so it can reduce the carbon emission more than 30 or 40% compared to the huge financial investment for the infrastructure. And the other one, how about in the city? So I think in many countries, particularly in Southeast Asia and in Thailand, young generation, they have the long perception that if the people use wood, become the bad guy, destroy the forest. But however, for example, in Sweden and in the other country, so they want to promote the plantation and use the wood from sustainable resources. For example, the chair and the building, this one also can restore the carbon. So based on this policy, they can increase the forest cover from 75 to 75%. So if you see the carbon stock in the ecosystem and carbon storage in the urban, is increased tremendously by using this approach. And this one has been what you call encouraged by two important already. One is the executive director of the International Tropical Timber Organization, using the wood from sustainable forest management from certified, for example, from the PPFS. And the other one is the secretary from Europe that encourage also using the wood for the infrastructure. And this is also the example from other countries in Asia, in Japan, in Sweden, and so on. Next. So in conclusion, so I think every people already knows and recognize that biodiversity has the reputation of adaptation, even though we try to build the resilience, but they have the limit. If beyond the tipping point, it will extinct. So the best one is to avoid the loss and degradation of the biodiversity loss. So the most important one is to establish protected area. But protected area alone cannot solve the problem. So we have to look beyond the traditional protected area to see the remaining forest cover outside protected area and in the city. And how to do that? We have to change the perception of the public and society, transformative change, and also from the government using the interconnected policy. And landscape restoration, even though it's cheap and this one. However, in many countries, they have something like the more adaptation, use the mass plantation. But this one also cause the problem to biodiversity. And the last one, monitoring biodiversity to monitor the achievement and the progress is also very important to see the success of our approach. So that's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor TRISURAT. Thank you for painting an overall large-scale picture of how international society is responding to today's challenge, which is addressing the issue of climate change and biodiversity loss by highlighting the interconnectedness between biodiversity and climate change. So now we are ready to take a 20-minute coffee break, but